Welcome to a new episode of Business Meets Life, and today we have amazing Frank Tsai with us here in Shanghai. It's nearly 40 degrees outside, that's why we're hiding in the office. How are you today?
Doing well, it's a beautiful day.
Wonderful. And he's spending a Saturday afternoon with me. I appreciate it. Now, Frank, who is the real Frank? I mean, we can all see you all over the media. I think within the last 3 years, you have been on 52 different major media, from CNN, BBC TV, BBC Radio, and Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, etc., etc. So who's the real Frank?
That's a really tough question. When you look at my face, and you know, I have an American accent, but you know, I'm Chinese ethnically, so one answer is I'm an ABC. That's actually important. So I came to China more than 15 years ago because, like many ABCs, I felt, you know, I'm part of both cultures. I could be a bridge between the two cultures. You know, very standard stuff actually. But I think I've actually made a difference in making this bridge. We can talk about it a bit more. So one answer is that, you know, I'm a Chinese American, you know, having a career in China and having some impact. But also I think, you know, one thing is that I'm an introvert. So I'm an introvert, and if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I'd be a big events guy, I'd be the largest organizer of public lectures in Shanghai, I would have laughed at you. Because I didn't go to many events, I didn't go to many lectures, I didn't network much, right? So I think part of the story too is that I'm an introvert, and in my prior career, I was frustrated in certain roles I had in being pegged as the research guy, the introvert, and not the outer-facing guy. So I more or less got my revenge on those people by having the biggest network, or a bigger network than they did anyway. You see what I mean? So the events grow out of a certain personality type. I always advise people, if you want to grow your network and you're not comfortable just, you know, walking into a room and shaking people's hands, run your own event, because you're always the center of attention that way. It's a great way for introverts to grow their network.
And what you just mentioned, has that been like part of the motivation why you actually quit your job and started your own company?
Absolutely, so that's a great story. So, you know, officially in my career, I spent 10 years working in political risk consulting and control risks. I spent a shorter time at the Economist Intelligence Unit. But in both roles, I was frustrated in that I was always pegged as the nerdy, you know, academic, a research guy who has these insights, but, you know, not the guy who's going to go out and make rain for the company. And at a certain point, I get frustrated, and the backstory is I've been doing events for a very long time. For the first 11 years, actually just for fun with my alumni club, the Johns Hopkins University. And at some point while I was working for Control Risks, actually, you know, my boss would go meet clients and they'd say, oh, you work with Frank Tsai, you know? And so I was getting bigger and bigger, and I thought to myself, you know, I should do my passion. So the first step I made was to go work for the Economist Corporate Network, which is a very high-end networking service with events. It's 100,000 RMB a year. It's very, very luxury, high-end. And to do my passion, I wanted to get out of research, out of political risk, into events. And I was frustrated because I'm actually not a luxury guy, it turns out. I'm more about grassroots and community. So after about 11 years of doing these lectures for fun, I started my own company in 2020. I've been running it for 4 years now. And that's been quite an interesting challenge.
Actually, this is where it comes in on how Frank and I met. Do you remember how we met?
Of course, yeah.
We actually both started our company with Kudos Bay, which back in the days was, a lot of foreigners went with them here in Shanghai. But I think we met that day when the company was closing down, and some of them actually, of the founders, went into jail. We had to pick up all of our accounting stuff. Was that the day?
Right, yeah. We were at the Entry-Exit Bureau in Songjiang District, and that was when the company was closed down by the regulators, which is an interesting story in itself. And you know, we weren't affected, but you know, some people had fraudulent books, and the government was cracking down back then. Actually, my personal consultant went to jail, and he called me.
Oh my gosh.
He called me when he got out of jail, and he told me about his experience. It really, in many ways, unfair, because he's just, you know, he's a mid-level manager. He didn't make the decision.
He just followed what he was told to do.
But it's an interesting China story we can talk about more too.
Wow, that's crazy. So yeah, I started my company 1 year before you. Now let's talk a little bit more about China, actually. So, I mean, if you guys want to learn about all the geopolitical topics, you just go on YouTube, you go on CNN and all the media, and this is what Frank normally talks about, right? So my first question to you would actually be, what's the most significant change you've observed in China over the past decade, and how has it impacted your work?
Sure. So let me preface this again by saying that I run a lot of events. I run 70 public lectures a year, and I've run about 600 since 2010.
Wow.
Now, these are public events, right? So 5-6 years ago, I could run any event I wanted in public because the government didn't care, or the Shanghai government didn't care. But since zero COVID and the tightening, and especially since the unrest of 2022, the Shanghai public security has cared much more about the content of not just my events, but others.
Yes.
So the biggest impact that has been on me has been that China has been tightening in terms of what it allows in civil society and what's said in the public. Now, I'm in no way, a negative on China. There's great things about living and working here.
Definitely.
But some of what the foreign media says is true, in that China feels under threat from the West and the US in particular. The US puts pressure on China. China feels more fear of subversion and influence by the US, and so it tightens what can be said in the public sphere. Yeah. Now, this affects a very small proportion of people. Most people working in China, and I assume you as well, you're not influenced, but I'm just known as a guy who's run a lot of lectures, right, over many years. So then, I have to worry a bit about my own security risk. What the government thinks about what I'm doing, how much they monitor me, and what I can actually host. I don't host anything US, China in public. I don't host anything on Russia, Ukraine in public. And because I now run a company, a membership organization, I do that stuff privately for members only, and we still do it. It just no one knows about it.
I see.
So I hope it's interesting for your audience about what's actually happening on the ground here in China.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like with Monday Morning Motivation, every Monday we still have the webinars, but we also do it on Zoom, which then Zoom is online, and it's different compared to Tencent meeting or doing this in person, right? Yeah. And we've had some huge, big like networking events, or like the female empowerment ones, of females who tech, that got cancelled, I think 2 years ago. It was a big one. I mean, that was my event, but
it's a nuanced issue. I mean, if it involves something where the government thinks you might be trying to influence China, especially like LGBT, something like that, then you could be
LGBTQ plus.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But in general, I say that people don't have to worry, because you have to already be established as somebody who has some organizational power in the city before people start looking at you. So most people don't have to worry.
Now talk about this. I mean, in Shanghai and probably beyond Shanghai, you're very well known, as you mentioned, and I can definitely say that everybody knows Frank, which is amazing. And the lectures, the speakers you have in your over 600 lectures, they're amazing quality, what they can tell, like from the biggest companies, actually high positions, from researchers to universities and so on. But at the same time, you basically speak and give, you speak at foreign media. How were you able to also work with so many different major media that they're all contacting Frank from Shanghai to get comments on their topics?
Now, Frank Tsai is the founder and CEO of China Crossroads, working closely with academic and business figures in China, and he's joining me now from Shanghai. So, Frank Tsai, welcome back to our program. What stood out for you, despite what we just aired, as the most significant aspect of this Congress underway now in Beijing?
Good question. So, in many ways, I got lucky. So, I have media training from my previous professional life, but when zero COVID happened, a lot of journalists couldn't get into China, or their visas were delayed. And so they were really looking for on-the-ground reports of people in Shanghai. So I think myself and maybe 10 other people really got a lot of media during that time. Of course, the lockdown was big too. And I guess I've been organized since then. I just keep up with the journalists. Many are reporting from Hong Kong, Singapore. They really need on-the-ground insight about many topics. I'm helpful if they want, a quote on something I have no idea about. Of course, I'll refer them. So I have a large expert network. I'm helping them. But if it's a topic I know about, if it's geopolitics or something about the party, you know, I'm quoted sometimes as well. So it's been I would say it's been a bit of a dream come true in many ways, because you know, my background is that I've been passionate about China, studying China for a very long time, and I do have a bit of influence now, you know, whether it's the global dialogue or you know, especially in person in Shanghai. But I think I had a bit of luck, and I've just followed up with that. Yeah, I mean, a little anecdote. So remember when we were locked down, and the first 24 hours, nobody reported that there were issues of people not getting enough food, right?
Interesting.
And so I actually mentioned that to a journalist and said, you should write a story about that, or you should interview someone about that, because I just got ahead of the curve just by, let's say, 12 hours, and that helped me a whole lot. Now, part of it too is LinkedIn. I'm pretty big on LinkedIn, actually. I had 1 million views on LinkedIn in a certain year. And that's because I run an event and I add a lot of people to LinkedIn. So when we had the lockdown, a lot of journalists were looking for on-the-ground insight via LinkedIn, and so some of us got lucky and we were contacted.
That was the time when I also worked with some journalists, but also because I was one of the COVID positive ones from the start. So that's a different story, right?
COVID positive in what sense?
It was literally in the first few days that I was discovered, and my flatmate had reported me to the government. And you are a cat person, right?
Right, yeah.
So I had my 2 cats at that time, and I illegally evacuated them.
Right.
And so you also have 2 cats, right? From the streets?
I do, yeah. From our compound, I rescued 2 cats.
How old are they?
One's about 1 year, one's about 5 years.
I never would have thought you were a cat person.
I became a cat person only 6 months ago. I'm very passionate about them.
Oh, congratulations.
And one thing is, I think in Shanghai, there are a lot of people care about animals. So I think China's changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years. A lot of care goes into rescuing them and neutering them.
Yeah, it's a growing business. So if you guys want to start another business in Shanghai,
pet care, definitely.
Exactly. So let's move on. Out of the over 600 lectures that you have organized, what has been the most surprising or impactful or interesting lecture?
It's really hard to say. I get this question all the time, and there's so many good ones, but certainly the most objectively impactful has been Wang Dan, the chief economist at Hang Seng Bank. She's all over the global media, and my biggest revenue night, my biggest attendance ever has been her. I think she's number 1 and 3 in my rankings. And also she gave a great interview for us. I have a YouTube channel as well called Crossroads TV, and she just explains the Chinese economy so well as a non-native speaker of English, and just in plain spoken terms. And I've used that in my own teaching. We both teach at EM Lyon. I've used that to soak up 1 hour of class too, to teach my students. So I think she's been the best impactful speaker I've had. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I look forward to joining one of your next lectures for sure.
Yeah.
Because currently I'm not traveling so much. How often do you organize it? Every month?
Yeah, so it's on average 6 times a month, 72 per year, and it sounds like a lot. But the way I work is that I have to do a lot of events, because it's really about people getting to know each other. You know, people at first think that I'm in the content business, but I'm really in the community business. So you can go to, you know, some lectures are great, some are average, but as you keep going, you'll meet other people. The lecture could be average, but the Q&A could be good. Someone could ask a question and you'll start talking to them. So I'm really more in the community building business, and that just requires high frequency. People are just animals. So if you see the same person in the same room 5 times, you'll say hi. You see what I mean? We just have that kind of like instinct. So you just have to do a lot. I'd also say that I don't consider myself being very high end. I think I'm a mid-end kind of event series. So to justify a membership fee that sustains my life, you know, that gives me an income, I have to do more events, right? So if I did 20 events a year, I could not charge that much for a membership fee. Of course, if you do 70, you can charge more, and I can at least sustain the lifestyle I have when I work at The Economist. I'm not making big money, but I have a decent income.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it's about that too.
So earlier I told you, like, Frank, let's not only talk about like business and these kind of topics. Let's talk a little bit about your life, the private you. Because I think you're very successful. I mean, so many people know you inside China, outside China. And yes, you're also lecturing at some business schools. You're doing so many different kind of things. what do you think makes you so successful? Like a lot of people have specific routines in the mornings, in the evening, or do you have a specific like life philosophy or religion, or I don't know. Can you, do you mind opening up a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have great advice on this, honestly, because I think I may be different from a lot of your audience and your other speakers, but I find that I thrive under pressure. Okay, so when you run events, you have to do it right now. It's kind of like taking care of a baby, you know? When the baby's there, you take care of it. Now, my background is, in some ways, I'm a frustrated academic, you could say. So I've had a kind of an academic career before this. I used to teach at People's University 18 years ago. And so here's the contrast, you know, you can engage in a lifestyle where you're always planning what, you know, your next 6 months, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write an article, and you're always have this kind of diffuse anxiety, like there's 10 things you have to do now, and what am I going to prioritize? And I could say that's stretching your mind over time. It's not something we human beings were designed to do. I think that we were designed to deal with things as they come. So I thrive in that environment where there's things to deal with, there's action happening, and events is definitely that, right? So it says something about me. You could say I'm not disciplined, you could say, right? Do I have a routine? I don't think I have much of a routine. The events are coming and I do them. So that's one answer. But another answer is like, you know, how do you succeed in life, or what do you do? There's got to be some planning for sure, but I've known so many young people who, you know, have a map of 5 or 10 years, and if you talk to them 5 or 10 years later, it never works out that way. So what I like to say is that, you know, we know very little about ourselves, actually. So I think it's bad to act on a theory of who you are. So in my past career, I wanted to be a professor. I'm not a professor. I mean, I'm an adjunct, but I'm not a guy, you know, who's a tenured professor and, you know, lecturing all the time, right? So simply because I had a theory of myself, that's what people said I should be and who I thought I was. But it turns out I like to be in action. I like working in office, and I like running my own company. And that's how I thrive. But you can only know that if you do it.
Exactly.
Right? So I sometimes call this the amoeba theory of career. So don't think too much. Don't have no amoeba has a theory of itself, right? It just goes to where the food is, and it thrives by being open to new possibilities, you could say, right? And I think that many entrepreneurs actually work that way.
I feel you.
Right. And we learned that from China too. I mean, China's grown so fast and risen partly because of, you know, something about this culture where people do act on opportunities. Right?
That's interesting. So you said, you mentioned recently, like you've been to Bali, and like, what do you plan for what's coming next for like China Crossroads, for example? Like, now that you're just saying, like, okay, you got to do, and maybe don't have too many plans, or like what's coming next? Do you have a 5-year plan, or like, do you have any specific goals for your company or for your life?
Yeah, I have no plans for China Crossroads, and I have no vision. Now, I say that, what's a vision? So when I say no vision, I'm criticizing, honestly, I'm criticizing Mark Zuckerberg when he had a nice little Facebook for Harvard and people were very happy, and then he got really big and lost all of his existing customers. And of course, that's a very smart decision for him business-wise, but I think about the customers he had who don't use Facebook anymore, right? Now, great decision for him, but for me, honestly, my addressable market's not very big, right? So it's very hard to go big without doing things on Chinese social media that are too risky for me, right? Because I have a certain kind of event where I do half business talks, about a fourth are on international affairs, different countries, you know, different consulates. So you can't do that in Chinese. So I have to stay away from that for my own personal security. So how big can I really get? It's all organic growth, actually. So I don't have big plans for China Crossroads. I do have a YouTube channel now. I'm trying to make sure that people abroad see that we have expertise. You're not just us, but you as well. There's so many people who really understand China so well, and they're not in the global media, right? So
yeah, we don't have to be journalists, some of us.
Right, exactly. So that's my plan. I do give talks abroad. I try to get the YouTube going so that people know that the expertise is here, not necessarily, you know, New York or London. But in general, I don't have big plans for China Crossroads. Just grow the community. Organic growth, you know, 20-25% a year. Sounds like a lot, but it's a small base. That's what I do.
That's amazing. So as we also work with students every now and then, Chinese and foreign students, students, I always feel like it's good to have a role model, a mentor, not just for students. I think even for adults, like right now I'm looking for a mentor, and to be honest, it's really not easy to find a proper mentor. Now, one reason why I'm doing this is because let's have some role models, let's get advice. And what has been the best business or life advice you've ever gotten and you wish you would have had it earlier?
Good question. I think I may have covered it a bit, but just, it sounds like a cliche, but you really have to do your passion and don't act on what you think you are or other people think you are. And you know, be open to discovery. So I started this interview by saying that I didn't know I'd be an event guy. You have to be open to those possibilities, right? And so, yeah, specifically, I'm an event guy because I never had a big network, or you know, growing up as a younger person. So I'm incredibly gratified by the fact that I have a huge network. Now, you know, it could be that you're, you know, what I've noticed that oftentimes the people who are unattractive or unpopular when they're 16. They work at it, and when they're 35 or 40, they become so. And maybe even more so, the person who is attractive or has the dates or this kind of, when they're 16, when they're 40, they're not, because they didn't work. So we work because we want to fill a hole inside of us. I've mentioned what my hole is, that I'm an introvert and I have to find my way. Other people have other holes. I would say that more than half the professors I know, they have a hole too. They don't think they're smart. They have to prove it continuously. That's why they succeed. They worked. Right? So same with the unattractive person becomes attractive, the introvert becomes a big network, or the professor who always wanted to impress the teacher. Working hard. Everything's about work.
Makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
And in your opinion, what's the definition of happiness and success?
So mine may differ from a lot of people. It's definitely impact. So, and more specifically, you know, if I had died when I was 30, I don't think I would have made much difference in the world. But you know, now that I've run this event for so long, there have been so many friendships, marriages, children, business partnerships, jobs that have come out of this community. Of course, I feel like I've done something important in the world. It's not just that though, but we're part of this expat community in China, and I'm bringing people together, and we have a real role in how the future unfolds with China and the world. And you know, there's only what 100,000 of us or so, but you know, we go back home and we have influence, and we should have more. So that's I think, a historical role we're both playing to try to promote understanding what China, but also have some impact on what's really going on here. Yeah, so that's part of what gratifies me.
I love that you're saying this. Actually, for me, it's exactly the same driver. I want to have a global impact. And it's so interesting. I mean, whenever I get some feedback, because very often I don't get the feedback from the people on how much we're changing their lives through our webinars or the motivation that we're doing. But sometimes you get to meet them. Oh, you've helped me overcome depression. I found my long-term girlfriend through your event. And this is literally the fuel. So I can just encourage you guys, even for this podcast, if you're like having any advantages from it, benefits, share it with others. And maybe also tell us. Also follow Frank on like China Crossroads, right? On YouTube, right? So yeah, sharing is caring. Good. I think we're slowly coming to an end. Are there any last words that you actually would like to share with our followers here?
Sure. So I'm really happy to do this podcast, but also, you know, I am invited to do others, and I often say no. I'm incredibly happy that you've come to my event and you've heard Gabor Holch speak. You know, I'm hosting these events, you know, 6-7 times a month, and it looks like a great job, and it is. But you know, more than half my work is actually just marketing the event to get people to come. So I'm incredibly happy when people actually do come. So that's a big reason why I support this and wish this to succeed.
Thank you so much, Frank. And I highly recommend you, if you guys are based in Shanghai or you're traveling to Shanghai, go to Frank's events. We're going to have his contact details attached. Follow him on YouTube, like, subscribe, share it with others. And thank you so much for your time. It's a beautiful sunny day in Shanghai, so I'm going to let you enjoy your weekend now.
Thank you very much for hosting me. It was fun.
Thank you, Frank. Take care, guys.